Here we go.
Performance for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap. As we take you through this
Yakuza 5.
rap.
Good evening. My name is John Hub, and I talk about video games on the internet. While some people vow to hit the gym or eat healthy this year, my New Year's resolution for 2024 is to 100% all of these games, all in under a year. After hearing countless horror stories about completing Yakuza 5 for the past 7 months, the day has finally come. Will Yakuza 5 be the game to finally break me? Is HowLongToBeat.com's estimate of 156 hours to complete this game accurate? I sure hope not. Find out all of this and more right now in this special, long-ass installment of Year of Like a Dragon. Yakuza 5 has a fixation on the number 5. This game is divided into 5 parts, features 5 playable characters, has 5 explorable cities, and there's also 5 million things to do in this game before it's complete. Suffice it to say, there is no shortage of content in this game. With so many things to do, it's made it kind of hard to structure this video. The best way I can think to do it was by dividing this video into 5 parts with 4 to 5 chapters each. It is a bit convoluted, but so was devising a route to complete this game in the first place. I'd like to take this part of the video to go over a brief summary of the characters, a tiny bit about their individual stories, as well as their playstyles. Let's start with the first member of the Yakuza 5. Kazuma Kiryu, the man, the myth, the legend. He's the leader of the bunch, you know him well. You may know him from such games as Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami 1, Yakuza Kiwami 2, Yakuza 3, but also Yakuza 4. Well, he isn't in this game. But, you do play as a taxi driver who perfectly matches Kiryu's height and weight and description and literally is him, but he's using an alias this time around. Kiryu has tried in vain in almost every game in the series to return to civilian life and spend time with his adoptive daughter Haruka, and this game is no different. The only problems that he faces this time around is that he can't see his daughter because she's trying to become an idol, and he gets immediately recognized and dragged into Yakuza affairs in Chapter 2 of this game, so that's not too great. These conflicts allow us to see a side of Kiryu that is just angry. I can't recall a single time in this game where this guy cracks a smile, and his gameplay embodies that. While his fighting style is largely the same mechanically, there is an air of brutality in Kiryu's playstyle that was simply not there in previous games in the series. Kiryu can chain a grab at the end of every combo that allows him to lift enemies over his head and throw them 5 to 10 feet away, and he's got a special move that gives him new combos and makes him invincible for a limited time. Not to mention, at the end of his story section, he fights like 100 men by himself. I found this boss fight against these two guys to be a bit difficult, as well as this fight in a small room with a guy who's got like 3 health bars and a strange attack pattern. Kiryu's section ends when he discovers that Goro Majima has been unalived, prompting him to head back to Kamurocho, a setting that has appeared in every game in the series thus far. All in all though, this is the strongest Kiryu has ever felt. But speaking of people who are strong, Saejima was introduced in Yakuza 4 as Majima's bestie bop, who served jail time for a crime he technically didn't commit. His story in Yakuza 4 began with a prison break. Now, in Yakuza 5, it also begins with a prison break. Yeah, so Saejima is actually serving out the rest of his prison sentence, but he breaks out a second time upon hearing the tragic news about Majima, which he's understandably upset about, but also because his own life is in danger. Also, he's bald! He's bald! Everyone laugh at him! Although, I hope you didn't actually laugh at him because he is powerful as hell in this game. His special ability gives him the strength to lift enemies and swing them around like they're nothing. If that wasn't scary enough, he also has an upgrade that makes him unflinching to attacks, a counter move called the Dragon Tiger Drop, which is just Kiryu's Tiger Drop move, but he uses his head instead. And he has the largest health bar in a Yakuza game, like ever. There's a lot that happens in Saejima's story section. There's old friends, there's new friends, there's even a bear.
I'm cold as a lion with no hair. If you ever see me fighting in the forest with a grizzly bear, help the bear!
Despite all of that, Saejima just steamrolls through every combat encounter in his story section. Just like the end of Kiryu's story, he goes to Kamurocho at the end. I wonder if they'll team up. But speaking of people who decide to team up, For the first time in Yakuza game history, you could play as Haruka. And about time too. Also a series first is that her gameplay sections are not about fighting, but rather have her performing as an idol. The closest thing to fighting that she has are song performances, which are basically the karaoke minigame, as well as dance battles, which are also like the karaoke game. Being someone that's now 6 Yakuza games deep into a challenge, this was a much needed change up to the gameplay in my eyes, but it was a bit repetitive. There's really only like 3 songs that you perform, and you do them over and over and over. They're catchy as hell, but I would have loved just like one more song, or just one more thing to change up the gameplay. Haruka's story follows her through the trials and tribulations of her idol career. We're introduced to her publicist, her dance coach, her manager, and she's dead. All of a sudden, fan favorite guy Akiyama shows up. Turns out he was working with Haruka's manager, and he and Haruka believe that her sudden death was staged. The rest of the story goes back and forth between Akiyama and Haruka, where Akiyama busts skulls to find answers, and Haruka dances. The two of them chase clues, and we find out that not only was Haruka's manager murdered by her dance coach, but also, and you're not going to believe this, he's got Yakuza ties. We also find out that Park, who was Haruka's manager, was married to Goro Majima? This game can't get this man's name out of its mouth. Much like every other main character thus far, Haruka and Akiyama head to Kamurocho at the end of their part. Akiyama's combat is basically just a carbon copy of his Yakuza 4 moveset, but he's got one added ability, which is just Sanji's airwalk shit from One Piece. He was probably my least favorite character to fight as in Yakuza 5, but his story fights weren't hard in the slightest. Seeing as he shares a part with Haruka and the two share a goal, he's unfortunately the least important playable character in the story. But next, I want to talk about the most important playable character in the story. One thing that I have learned from 100%ing this series is that these games are all great, but it's hard to say that anything is perfect, like a 10 out of 10. This may be a hot take, but I firmly believe that Shinada is a 10 out of 10. He's the last playable character in the game, and they saved the best for last for sure. What drew me to him is that he's just like me for real. He's funny, he's talented, he likes baseball, he could barely afford rent, he's on the verge of being broke, his dreams from when he was younger were ripped out from under him and are seeming less and less likely to come true by the day, and it's killing him inside. Shinada's gameplay is interesting to say the least. He's advertised as a weapons expert, and he even has a few weapons with infinite durability, as well as unique weapon attack animations. The only problem is, his weapon attacks do no damage whatsoever, and this punch to heavy attack to grab combo is really the best thing he's got in his arsenal. Come to think of it, he's more of a grappler in practice, despite the game never mentioning it. Even his special ability is this grab that lets him run enemies into the wall. I really did not use weapons that much while playing as him, but I love his playstyle nonetheless. I'm a huge fan of characters with unusual movesets, and Shinada's is definitely the unusualist. Can I please get a hashtag unusualist in the chat, please? Thank you. Shinada goes to Kamurocho just like the others at the end of his part. I really didn't share many details about his story in particular, because I'd highly suggest that you check it out for yourself. He also may be the only Yakuza character to ever get a resolution to his story, and a satisfying one at that. And that is every member of the Yakuza 5. Here's a top 5 ranking of how fun each person was to play, story included. Here you go. In Yakuza 5, everyone has what are called side stories. Other games in the series have this type of activity, and they're basically more in-depth minigames that take a bit longer to complete than your average minigame. They're usually story-related, and I've called them things like main side things, biggie games, big-ass games, you name it. It's cool that this game has a designated name for these, though. As part of Kiryu hiding his identity, he assumes the role of a taxi driver. If you've ever dreamed of driving a taxi as your favorite video game character, Kazuma Kiryu, well boy do I have news for you. I love this minigame. Have you ever played Grand Theft Auto and pretended to be a law-abiding citizen following traffic laws and not running people over? The taxi driver side story is 1/3 that exact thing I just described, 1/3 shovelware Need for Speed game, and 1/3 multiple choice test, I guess? There's an embarrassing amount of taxi missions where you just chat with passengers about whatever. These usually involve you choosing the best dialogue option to respond to whatever nonsense they're talking about, and subsequently fighting them because they said some wild shit, I guess. I loved following traffic laws, and the other parts were just okay. 7 out of 10. I didn't mention it before, but there's an entire part of Saijima's story where he stays in a hunting village and goes hunting in full Elmer Fudd apparel. That's what we're calling hunting clothes now, by the way, Elmer Fudd apparel. You embark on multiple hunting expeditions in a fairly large area. I initially thought this would be like an open world thing where you go out and you're tasked with hunting certain animals, like Monster Hunter, but you're hunting animals instead. Instead, it's just these linear missions where you run to a part of the forest and maybe have to hunt a bear now and then. There are side missions that are more like what I was expecting. Around town, there's NPCs with hunting requests, but most of their requests ask you to do things like retrieve pelts and other animal parts that you'll likely already have from having done a bit of hunting. This one was a little underwhelming, but I did like that the bears could dodge bullets for some fucking reason. 5 out of 10. Yakuza 4 had what I consider to be the worst side story of all time, Hostess Maker. This was Akiyama's side story, where you walked up and down the floor of a cabaret club and played Roblox Dress to Impress 3 times a shift. As punishment, RGG Studios decided to not give Akiyama a side story in Yakuza 5. I believe this was the safest option at the time. Now, Haruka's side story, I actually really enjoyed. The Road to Fame has Haruka going about her day-to-day as a pop star. You perform at a couple of events, go on game shows, and shake hands with weird old men. She's really living the dream. There's also the strange event where you have to alternate button presses and run like you're in a horror movie, that you have to do like 6 times and it's the same thing every time. I enjoyed the amount of variety that this side story had to offer, and I liked how it felt like a natural extension of the story itself. 8 out of 10. Speaking of natural extensions of the story, one of Shinada's defining characteristics is that baseball is his passion. Saejima doesn't give a shit about hunting, but Shinada fucking loves baseball. As such, the cost of a swing is a collection of baseball-themed missions. You raise your baseball stats and have all sorts of baseball-related encounters with a bunch of wacky characters. If you don't like baseball, you may not like this one. But if you do, you will. 10 out of 10. This part of the video will focus on all things combat. If there's some completion stuff related to fighting, it'll be here. You'd be surprised how little of an 100% of one of these games actually does consist of combat. Anyway. Every playable character in Yakuza 5 has a training master. Some have multiple, and some training masters are for multiple characters. I can't keep track of this game anymore, man. In terms of individual training masters, Kiryu trains with Sosuke Komaki, who is actually the grandson of Sotaro Komaki, who is Kiryu's usual trainer. Sosuke teaches you how to better use Kiryu's invincibility and rampage mode, as well as reteaches him stuff like the Tiger Drop and other techniques that he definitely already knows. Saejima trains with Tendo, who may or may not be a deity who lives up in the mountains. You give him an offering like a carrot or the pelt of an animal, and he expands your moveset. He can also fucking fly. Even though she doesn't fight, Haruka trains with a woman named Yoko. She gives you upgrades primarily for Haruka's dance battles, but also gives some handy upgrades that help during concert performances. Akiyama trains with Saigo, who is actually his trainer from Yakuza 4 as well. His trainer fights are some of the hardest, as you have to fight Saigo and a couple of other enemies while they're using guns. Not only that, but they also don't flinch when they're aiming their guns, and they fire in such a wide radius that it's nearly impossible to dodge all of them at once. Completing this training will give Akiyama more abilities, primarily with his launch strike. Shinada is special, because I love him and he's my favorite guy in the whole world and I love him to death, but also because he has 2 individual trainers. The first is Igarashi, who trains Shinada specifically in his baseball minigame. The trainings consist of balancing recreational activities with a proper diet, all with the goal of hitting that freaking ball out of the park. Doing these trainings makes Shinada's cost of a swing side story 1,000 times easier. Shinada's other trainer is Ayano Koji, who develops his combat abilities. Most of the upgrades revolve around weapon use, as Shinada is advertised as a weapon specialist, but I ended up not using a lot of these in practice. Now that we've talked about everyone's individual trainers, let's talk about the trainers that any character can access. The first shared trainer is Tatsuya, who's a real chef in Japan. Your trainings for him consist of going to different restaurants that he may like, and reporting your findings to him. He has the single most useful upgrade, which is the ability to double your HP bar by going to a restaurant. The next shared trainer is Minamita, who's been in Yakuza 3 and 4 in the past. He has an upgraded version of a VR training program. As a base, it's recommended that you donate a lot of yen to access every feature of the training program, but once you do, the only playable trainings are a flashback battle, which have characters fighting a boss from the game, and this scuffed beat 'em up mode that takes entirely too long to beat. The only cool part about this one is that it's the closest we get to seeing Haruka fight. This training has a couple of general upgrades. One lets you increase the rate at which you generate heat, one boosts your heat gauge in general, and if you do a training as a specific character, and then do that exact same training 8 more times, you get a skill point each time. These are skill points that can only be earned through this method, and without doing the same training 9 times, you can't max out your skills. The final trainer is Sotaro Komaki. As I mentioned before, this trainer is usually reserved for just Kiryu, but every character can train with him. He allows everyone to reach a breakthrough that increases your level cap on a specific character from 20 to 25. Haruka does a dance battle with him for this, but the other characters have a fight with him and his grandson Sosuke at the same time. Luckily, you can bring super strong weapons into this fight, but this would be very difficult if that were not the case. And with that, that's all of the trainers. Sort of. Part of completing these last couple Yakuza games has been performing every single heat action. These are environmental special attacks that can be performed under specific circumstances. Despite there being over 100 of these between every playable character, these were pretty easy to perform. The only annoying part was having to swap characters for 2 seconds to do one specific heat action before switching back. Yakuza 5 exclusively has something called Climax Heat, which is a special type of heat action which can be performed when your Climax Heat bar is full. These are a cool touch, and oftentimes they're very powerful. Most of them have area of effect properties, or do massive single target damage. Using these in a group of enemies also scares any enemies the Climax Heat action did not hit. The reason I was saying I almost mentioned every trainer is because the game has revelations. These are random incidents witnessed by the playable characters that inspire them to learn a new heat action. These typically consist of an outlandish, unrealistic scenario, and without a doubt Saejima has the best revelation heat action in the game. After beating the story, you unlock Ultimate Battle. This is a mode of some of the hardest challenges Yakuza 5 has to offer. This time around though, they weren't too bad. I'll be listing the top 5 hardest ones right now. Number 5, Relentless 2. Most of the challenges on this list are centered around combat, but this non-combat one was particularly tricky for me. As Kiryu, you must run through this obstacle course of trash cans and assorted junk. I kept barely tripping over things, and when I ended up beating this one I definitely failed, but the game didn't fail me. It still counts though. Number 4, Melee Battle 10. This one has you fighting a group of enemies as Kiryu, all while you have 1 HP. The best strategy I could find was to grab and throw everyone, as doing this grants brief moments of invincibility. I would have gotten through it quicker if somebody didn't want to punch me so bad. What's your problem, man? Number 3, Climax Battle 5. As a fully upgraded Kiryu, you must do a huge boss rush, with minimal healing between each boss. I was able to Tiger Drop my way to victory since maxed out Kiryu is strong as hell, but these were definitely some of the hardest combat encounters in the game. Number 2, Relentless 3. In making this list, I definitely could have just placed every Shinada challenge here, because he gets some of the trickiest stuff. An honorable mention for this list is an Ultimate Battle where Shinada must line up 9 enemies in a row and throw a baseball through all 9 of them. He's not even a fucking pitcher, by the way. Relentless 3, however, is difficult because I think it's bugged in the remaster. You have a limited amount of time to do the scripted forklift chase scene from the story, but you either barely have enough time or barely run out of HP every time. I just kept doing this one over and over until I eventually got it. Number 1, Melee Battle 6. This one is the number 1 most difficult Ultimate Battle, as well as the strangest. When Shinada takes out or puts away one of his weapons, he does this tiny slash that does millimeters of damage. While in this one, you can only damage enemies using this fringe move of his. The optimal strategy consists of getting the 3 enemies close to one another so you can hit multiple at once. But the hitbox is so small, this is easier said than done. Couple that with a limited amount of time and this dumb bitch that keeps grabbing you, and you have the hardest Ultimate Battle by far. And that does it for the Ultimate Battles. Yakuza 5s are not too bad in all honesty. To my knowledge, these have not reappeared in any games I still need to complete, meaning I hopefully never have to do them again. Rest in peace, guys. Rest in hell. The Coliseum in Yakuza 5 is the worst iteration of this feature in the entire series from beginning to end. It's boring, it's exhaustive, and at points it's really hard. I'm going to explain in detail what you need to do to complete this part. Okay, so early on in the story, here you will come across a random encounter that's a little bit different than the normal enemy encounters on the street. You'll know you have your guy because it'll say Victory Road Qualifier, and you'll be fighting one guy with a larger health bar. When you beat him, he tells you about Victory Road and the Coliseum. You then need to find more of these encounters. There's no reliable method to finding these guys, so more often than not you'll be fighting groups of enemies that aren't Victory Road qualifiers. All enemy encounters take quite a bit of time, especially if you're doing this early on and Kiryu isn't leveled very much. After 2 to 3 qualifiers are found and beaten, they'll tell you about someone that's invited you to a fight. This will make a map marker appear and you go to the guy and fight him. You repeat this exact process 3 to 4 times until you're done with this system. Sounds easy, right? Well, it just started. You have to do this exact thing with every character, minus Haruka, and only then will you be able to go to the next step. Once you get to the finale of the story, and are able to play as every character, you'll run into the Coliseum champion on the street. You'll see him threaten and fight a guy that's bothering him. He's alright, I promise. You then walk all the way across the map to the Coliseum, where you can fight in the Victory Road Finals. This is a tournament where you fight every other party member, and then the champion at the end. You only get one attempt at this, and if you don't win, you actually lock yourself out of completing the entire Coliseum. This didn't happen to me, but I pray for all the poor souls that this did happen to. Then, after you do all of that, you can now fight in the Coliseum. In order to complete the Coliseum, you must get every party member, except for Haruka, to rank 4 in the Coliseum. You don't have to do this all at the same time, thankfully. You must also win every Coliseum match type at least once. When you're playing as Kiryu or Saejima, this is the easiest task of all time. Kiryu has built-in healing with his heat, and Saejima's a tank, and they both put out crazy damage. You still have to fight in no less than 40 fights in the same tournament just to get to rank 4 or higher though, but it's more tedious than it is hard. What is tedious and hard is doing the Coliseum matches as Shinada and Akiyama. Shinada, as you know, is a self-proclaimed weapons expert in a series of battles where he can't use weapons. Well, there's one tournament that lets you use weapons, but the weapons suck in it. Regardless, he doesn't do a ton of damage, and the enemies love blocking his attacks more than anyone's. If you can somehow set up a chain grab to recovering enemies, it becomes a lot easier, but the Deathmatch 100 and limited Berserk tournaments in particular prove to be such a pain. Akiyama has it worse in my opinion, because although he has good AoE, his knockback isn't great and his damage is just okay. Wait, I think they actually made a song about this. And also he fucking sucks in the Coliseum! But, after many hours and many attempts at Akiyama's fights, we ate and left no crumbs. This would not be a Yakuza game completion without a hearty portion of things to do around town. I would commend Yakuza 5 for having more activities to do in these huge cities than just story events and sub-stories, but a lot of this stuff just felt like busy work. Not to mention there's 5 different cities to explore. I'm going to try to get through these quick because otherwise this will be the longest video ever to exist. So here we go. There is so much content in this game that it's taken me half of the video to talk about sub-stories. These are equivalent to side quests in an RPG, and every character has them. Funnily enough, there aren't an awful lot of them, and I don't remember too much about these. I'll go over my favorites for each character. Kiryu has one early on where one of his coworkers at the taxi company he works at is having computer troubles. The game does that bit about unplugging it and plugging it back in, but also porn starts playing when you unplug the thing. It doesn't really make any sense. Saejima has one where you have to deliver ramen to someone down the block by traversing on an icy floor. You have to move at just the right speed to not bust your ass. By sheer luck, I was able to do this one first try. There's a group called the Amon clan that you famously fight as the last sub-story of every game. Haruka has one where she does a dance battle against a member of the clan, which I found to be pretty novel. Additionally, Akiyama also has a sub-story where he does a dance battle, which is funny because aside from this one sub-story and him sharing a part with Haruka, they don't have anything else in common gameplay-wise. I truthfully don't remember many of Shinada's sub-stories, but he does have one that unlocks an entire chicken racing minigame, and I'll talk more about that later. I thought it rocked though. As is Yakuza tradition, the final sub-story is against the Amon clan, where Kiryu, Saejima, Akiyama, and Shinada all fight members one at a time. This is always a tough fight, and I found Kiryu's to be the absolute hardest. With every sub-story done, you gain access to the Golden Pistol, which is a super powerful gun with infinite ammo. It basically guarantees that you'll beat the rest of the story and New Game Plus runs with ease as well. There are a number of restaurants in every city in the game, and you must eat and drink everything on the menu at every restaurant. The trickiest part about this one is that every character has a city that only they can go to, with the exception of Haruka and Akiyama who share one, so there's an added step where you must change characters every time you want to go to a new city. Donkey Kong 64 is famously criticized for having certain completion metrics that require you to run over to change characters just to collect like 5 bananas on the ground. This is the Yakuza equivalent to that, and there's a lot of times towards the end of my run where I had to change characters for 2 seconds just to do one specific task. Since you can only eat when you're not at full HP and drink when you're not fully drunk, the best strategy for tackling every restaurant is to buy drugs that reduce your HP as well as ones that make you more sober. You can only carry so many of these drugs in your inventory at once, so this task consisted of running to pharmacies and then to the item storage box over and over and over. I got through it, but did we really need 500 something menu items? Now, no Yakuza game would be complete without a mechanic where you have to pick shit up off the ground. And luckily this time around, every city has its own version of this. Kiryu picks up literal shit off the ground in a mechanic where you have to pick up trash off the street. There's an infinite amount of trash that needs to be picked up, just like in real life, and eventually the game just says that you've picked up enough. Saejima is tasked with finding pieces of treasure maps. The treasure in question is pretty ass and largely unhelpful. Akiyama and Haruka can pick up locker keys off the ground to get a ton of rewards. In the finale of the game, you can freely play as every character except for Haruka, so you actually can't reap any of the rewards as all the characters if you open lockers with Haruka. People warned me about this specific fact to the point that I thought I committed a cardinal sin by picking up a locker key as her by accident. Shinada can pick up lottery tickets off the ground, which he can use to win a number of rewards. Understandably, the system is largely luck-based, which wouldn't be a problem if an item or two required to complete the game could only be obtained through the system. I saved and reloaded multiple times before I got the illustrious pearl that I needed. More on that later. The final floor collectible is in Kamurocho, and it's locker keys again. The locker keys give you access to a number of weapons, crafting items, and minigame cheat items, and are largely more useful than any of the other aforementioned collectibles. I'm thankful for the rewards I received, but I came away from all of this thinking I could be better utilizing my time doing literally anything else. There are a number of cabaret clubs that can be visited in the game. 5 to be exact. And the number of hostesses? 5. And the number of hours that this activity took me? 3.5. Bad example. I've never liked the cabaret club stuff from any of these games. It's all visual novel dating sim conversation that doesn't really go anywhere. I'm not even really a hater of the genre, but when you have 5 girls and the game is talking to them 6 or 7 times, going on a date or 2, maybe fighting a guy for their honor, and knowing that you'll never see them again, it makes it hard for me to really ever be engaged or connected to this content. If there were some sort of twist or unlockable or deviation from the norm, that would be cool, but that never really happens with this system. To make matters worse, after going to 4 different cabaret clubs, you have to visit Club Shine in Kamurocho, which is owned by Akiyama. From there, you have to switch to each character, minus Haruka, talk to their hostess in the city that their story takes place, then bring them back to Club Shine. It's the Donkey Kong 64 thing again, guys! I'm sorry if this is harsh, but this system has only ever wasted time, ran my pockets, and made me look forward to doing literally anything else in this game. Okay, I might have spoken too soon. Kamiyama Works is the location of Yakuza 5's weapon and gear crafting system. By the time I got to this, I did almost everything else for 100% completion, and this was the right choice to make. Crafting everything requires millions of yen and random items that you must either invest to make a recipe available or use in the recipe itself. A bulk of the items can be found through sub-stories, which by the way, if you sell any of them, you likely cannot get them back. A good amount of crafting items are found at shops at a few different cities, and the remaining ones can be found through strange means like fishing or that lottery system that Shinada can do. The hardest item to find for me, however, was the Mystery Stone. Mystery Stones can be found through a couple of means, and the game requires you to find 10 of them. Well, that should be the case, but through looking it up online, it turns out that you only need 2. You need to invest 1 for a specific recipe, and the other 9 are required for the highest tier weapons in different categories. However, if you craft all 9 of these weapons at once, for some reason you only need 1 Mystery Stone. I don't know why this works or how someone found this out, but it's freaking epic, guys. As far as crafting systems go, this one wasn't too bad, but I would recommend that this be the last thing you do if you're also crazy enough to 100% this game. This series would not be nearly as great as it is without minigames. Freaking love them things. In past videos, I'd rank every minigame from easiest to hardest, but that was the old me. But this time, the new me, I'm going to put them in a tier list at the very end. It seems this old dog does know some new tricks. Here are the Yakuza 5 minigames ranked. Because I played the remastered version of Yakuza 5 on PC, slots and pachinko were not available whatsoever. You could enter the buildings that these minigames take place in, but not play them. For that reason, they will be going in the I don't know tier. Roulette, Blackjack, Baccarat, Mahjong, CeeLo, Oichokabu, and Chohan can all be easily completed using the abundance of cheat items that the game gives you. There are more games that use cheat items, but I'll be putting these specific ones in the cheat item tier, because you can do the entire completion requirement just by using a cheat item or two. Now we're talking about minigames where you actually have to play the game. Poker is a game that has a cheat item, but you still need to understand how poker works and leverage the cheat item bonus to your advantage. Add the little bit of grinding on top of that, and poker is the easiest minigame that you can't just autopilot. Shogi is a similar deal. There are cheat items that make you win a match automatically, but you can also just do the same super easy shogi puzzle 5 times in a row. Very easy minigame to complete. I love Cochin's Cup Classic. This is a Shinada only minigame where you're given a chicken and must enter it in races. It is a very repetitive and sometimes RNG dependent minigame, but it reminds me a lot of Chow Garden, so how can such a thing ever be bad? If you have a ton of money and a little bit of patience, this one is super easy to be honest. You'd think that a minigame where you get your picture taken would be the easiest thing in the world, and it kind of is. As every character, you need to pose for pictures with the perfect timing. Every pose has a slightly different perfect timing interval, so this one is mostly just trial and error. This is also another DK64 moment for me, where I had to go and swap characters just for this one activity. Comedy Team is a fast-paced minigame where Haruka does a duo stand-up act with some guy. Tatsuya Noodles is another fast-paced minigame where Kiryu cooks noodles for a busy restaurant. The gameplay consists of watching multiple stoves and taking noodles out at the perfect time. I completed this one on my first attempt. These next minigames gave me a bit of trouble, but overall were not too bad. Shinada has the exclusive batting center courses in his city of Nagoya. I don't think I failed a single one of these, and having maxed out baseball stats as Shinada helped a ton. Taiko Drum Master is a real game that you can play IRL. Usually played with a toy drum, this is a rhythm game where you beat the drum to the beat. There's like 3 songs and then it's over. Oh, I think that I found myself a cheerleader. She is always right there when I need her. And that cheerleader's name? Koi Koi. I love this minigame. There's cheat items for it, but I'd never cheat on you, girl. The lucky card cheat item basically gives you really good odds, which ultimately barely put a dent in the completion requirement for this one. It took a while, partly because you have to unlock the ability to increase your bet size, but also because even though I only recently learned how to play Koi Koi, I still kinda suck at it. And on the other end of things, I can't stand river fishing. It's simple enough where you cast a line and wait for the thingy to go down and pull it up. The problem comes in when you use an entire inventory full of bait and haven't caught that one specific fish you're looking for. I like stupid amounts of RNG when it comes to gambling games because you get money if you win, but who the hell cares about a damn fish? Rounding out this tier will be the UFO catcher. This is your standard claw game, but there's also that stupid put the peg in the narrow hole game that always has like an iPhone or something outrageous in there. This one you can actually win, but only after you've spent your whole life savings and memorized the exact pixel you need to stop the machine at. But hey, I won a Hatsune Miku, yay! Now we're in the hard tier. You want to talk about hard? Then look no further than the batting center in Kamurocho. You thought the Nagoya batting center was hard? Honey, try doing math while you're playing baseball. Yeah, I've never felt so dumb in my life. Winter Combat is kinda like that one dreary looking South Park game on N64 that I've never played because it looks kinda ass, but this is pretty good. It's a snowball fight first person shooter battle royale. Positioning is key here because if you're standing in the wrong place, you'll get teamed by everyone. Bowling is always a difficult one in the Yakuza games. I'm sure there's a strategy outside of throwing the ball the same way the whole time, but it just keeps working for me. Air hockey is the unofficial sequel to table tennis in Yakuza 4. You build heat by ogling at your opponent, which personally I don't love as a game mechanic, but what I do love is dunking on people. Get shit on! Pool is never easy in these games. It's already baseline difficult because you have to beat the advanced CPU on every game mode, but you also have to do all of Puzzle Pool. These are puzzles that require extremely precise shots, and for some reason they never QA tested Pool in the remaster, so the ball never goes where you want it to go. It turns out the problem is the right analog stick is so sensitive when you're pulling back during pool that if you're even a pixel to the left or to the right, the ball just goes wherever it wants to go. I was able to circumvent this by doing a scuffed setup where I pull back using the mouse and then hit the D-pad on my controller so that the controls snap back and I can hit a straight shot. But if you have to do this on console, I don't know what to tell you. We are now in the final 5, the difficultest of the difficult. And we're starting off with Virtua Fighter 2. This is a Sega arcade classic, and I just mashed until I won, but like it was actually calculated mashing that was hard to pull off, and you couldn't do it, but I could, so yeah. It's either a skill issue or a problem with the remaster, but I could not hit shit in darts this time around. Extremely sensitive controls paired with AI that doesn't miss is a recipe for disaster. We got through it, but holy moly, I suck. And listen, I can see the comments now. He has no style, he has no grace, this guy is a fucking disgrace. Anyway, speaking of minigames I suck at, my brain is simply not built for Gun Rain. This is an arcade game where you pilot a ship and defend a bunch of hexagons from some big snake fuckers. The hard part is the further that you go, the bigger fuckers the snakes become. I kept getting to the final level and choking, but I found out that spamming lasers was a much better strategy than trying to be super precise. Yakuza 3 and 4 had full-on golf courses, but 5 just has a driving range. The downsizing of this course and no longer needing to putt did not really make the golf any easier, however. You need to shoot super precise shots, and I really don't know how I got through this one. Lastly, at the number 1 spot is sea fishing, solely due to how long this took and how hard these were to catch. There's a massive list of fish to find, all with different baits, time of day requirements, and distances you have to cast your line to encounter them. You can be doing everything right and not catch what you're looking for like an hour and a half. This was by far the longest minigame, and that's what puts it at the number 1 spot for me. Oh, here's the finished tier list by the way. Show it to your friends so they can yell at me. For the past 5 games now, there's been a mechanic where you tend to Haruka's every need. You buy her thousands of dollars worth of food, you win in illegal gambling halls, sometimes she just wants you to catch a fish. These requests were fine when she was young, but the inclusion of them in Yakuza 5 feels strange when she's pretty much independent throughout the entire story here. This is the last game I'll be completing that includes these requests, and they weren't bad at all this time around. Nothing really of note, just walking around, buying her food, doing a minigame here and there. It's over, but honestly, good riddance. Well, I finished the in-game completion log, but there was still one more challenge left for me to face. Legend difficulty in New Game Plus. Many Yakuza games let you bring your post-game data to New Game Plus, so that you don't lose anything that you may have done after the story. Well, Yakuza 5 decided to omit this feature, despite it being present in the past 2 games, and this being the longest game, and why'd you guys do that? Anyway, I did my Legend difficulty run live on stream, twitch.tv/JohnHub, I also stream on YouTube, and brother, let me just tell you, it was legendary. I slept so good that night. HowLongToBeat.com puts Yakuza 5 at 156 hours to fully complete on average. Would you believe me if I told you that I 100% the entire in-game completion log and got 100% achievements all in 93.9 hours? This is actually considered a pretty fast time for this game. I tried in earnest to zoom through this game, but it's simply not possible. I did set a goal to 100% this game in under 100 hours, and I'm glad that I somehow did that. This game simply has the most game of any games in the series. Most mini-games, most story chapters, most playable protagonists. It was also my first time playing this game ever. And if you plan to play this game in particular for the first time, show yourself the tiniest bit of respect and don't 100% it, please. Thank you. And thank you, the viewer, for watching this far into the video. Not only was this game a nightmare to complete, but this video was equally as nightmarish to put together. I got started on Yakuza 6 in my spare time while I edited this, and I'm literally done with it already. Like, Yakuza 6 is complete in the time that it took to put the 5 video together. So that should be coming soon-ish. Anyway, I will see you then. Bye-bye.